issue of nature is so important to all of us. Mining companies are using environmental DNA techniques, using water samples to know which species live in the area, and then change the mine plan to make sure that we don't affect their habitats. Just three micro examples to give you.
Very good and very useful, Ro. Thank you very much indeed. And what a perfect segue, Tora, to you, the fact that Ro mentioned trucks. Tora Leifland is Head of Public Affairs at Volvo Group, and of course you heard from Tora earlier in our opening session. Talk to us a little bit, Tora, about the technologies you think, and you've talked to us a little bit about it already, but the ones that you think will be central to decarbonizing this sector, the mining sector.
So thank you for the opportunity to join this conversation. I think what distinguishes Volvo Group perhaps in this context is that we're both sourcing.
Yeah, just hold it a bit closer.
We're both sourcing from the mining sector. We're buying minerals and metals from the mining sector, and we're supplying the sector with equipment, trucks, construction equipment. So let me give you perhaps both perspectives coming to the technology point. So starting point for us, previous speaker was talking about applying the highest possible level of standards. So we have a supply partner code of conduct stating we expect net zero value chain by 2040. It's committed to all the international framework agreements like the UNGPs, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And in addition to that, we also apply a sustainable minerals program addressing conflict minerals. So our procurement department has a lot of influence. We have 50,000 tier 1 suppliers providing material data sheets so that we know what minerals and metals we have in our products. But that's the risk mitigation part. So maybe move to the downstream and how our technology can help to decarbonize mining. And we have a number of technologies. Battery electric trucks are available, commercially available on the market. And depending on access to infrastructure, this is attractive for mining companies. We're testing autonomous battery electric trucks at a mining site at the moment. We're also testing autonomous battery electric haulers in quarries. Another technology is hydrogen fuel cell electric. This is also suitable for mining, and there we have testing ongoing. Thirdly, what could also work is to use alternative fuels in an internal combustion engine. So biodiesel, biofuels, or renewable hydrogen. So we're doing testing on that. It looks promising.
Very quick follow-up, Tora. And we talked about collaboration at many different levels, but I'm interested to hear very briefly collaboration with your rivals, for example, others in the industry, others in the sector. How much collaboration do we see across the sector, Volvo with its rivals, Volvo's rivals with Volvo?
Well, we're part of a lot of industry collaborations. If you're talking about competitors, rivals, for example, we teamed up in the automotive industry. There is an initiative called Drive Sustainability. We have developed questionnaires for new suppliers to answer to make sure that we have certain standard of human rights, for example. And then on the commercial side, on the customer side, of course, we do collaborations with customers to develop new solutions tailor-made to each site.
Okay, good. Tora, thank you. Jan and Adam, you've been very patient with us, and I appreciate that. Jan, I'm going to come. Catherine mentioned tailings. I'm going to come. Jan Morrill is Tailings Campaign Manager at Earthworks. Clearly, there are some critical environmental and safety issues associated with mine tailings. Just run us through very quickly some of the best practices, some of the regulatory frameworks in place for tailings safety, and what more needs to be done.
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation. So first and foremost, safety needs to be the #1 priority in design, operation, maintenance, and closure for tailings facilities, and safety must be prioritized over cost. Poorly managed mine waste facilities cost workers and downstream communities their lives and livelihoods. I think hopefully we all remember the 272 lives lost at Vale's Brumadinho mine after the 2019 tailings failure there. But also just this month, a poorly maintained mine facility in Turkey collapsed, burying 9 workers. So we can't continue on with business as usual in tailings management, and the pace of change is too slow. Current industry standards and voluntary initiatives aren't going far enough, so we need governments to take decisive action to protect ecosystems, communities, and indigenous peoples. We have seen some good examples in regulation. For example, the ban of upstream tailings facilities in many countries in Latin America is a positive step, but we need to go further. And we need to make sure that regulators are including those most impacted by tailings dams in the decisions that are being made around tailing safety. So how are indigenous peoples being engaged? Is free and prior informed consent being recognized for tailings facilities specifically, not just on a mine site level? How are local communities engaged? How are workers engaged? We need to make sure that those voices are not only just listened to and consulted, but part of the decision-making process. So as a kind of result of the gaps that we at Earthworks and our partners and impacted communities have identified in tailings management, we developed 17 guidelines called Safety First, Guidelines for Responsible Mine Tailings Management, that are from a community, from an indigenous perspective, from a worker's perspective, a way to move forward in a very practical and implementable manner to improve tailing safety. And they focus on 3 areas. The first is safer technologies that are already available, like banning upstream dams, like ensuring dewatering of tailings facilities as much as possible, like making sure that there is design for the most extreme weather events as we face climate change, so that families, communities, and ecosystems in a tailings failure path are not impacted. Secondly, we identified the need for respect and information for impacted communities. As I said, this includes FPIC for indigenous communities. It includes access to information in a timely, language-appropriate way for impacted communities. And it includes making sure that communities are not in the flood path of a tailings failure. And then third, we need corporate accountability. So we need boards of mining industries, we need investors in the mining industry to really take responsibility to ensure that tailings management is being done in a way that, again, prioritizes safety, human lives, and protection of ecosystems over profit. Thank you.
Okay, Jan, thank you very much indeed. And Adam, to you, and forgive me here, but I have 2 titles for you. First, the Church of England Pensions Board, and the other is the Global Investor Commission on Mining. Which one is correct?
Both.
Oh, they're both right. Okay, good. Thank you. Thankfully. Okay. Well, I mean, last but not least, we come to the finance sector, of course, and we touched briefly on it. We heard from Botswana and the role that, or the collaboration that goes on with the finance sector. What's the role of finance, Adam, in playing a socially and environmentally responsible role in this space?
Well, it's considerable. We are the owners of many of the companies. We're the providers of finance. We share in responsibility for how the sector is addressing some of the challenges it faces. And I think we are going to be pivotal to whether the sector, in its largest sort of understanding, is able to meet the sort of demand for the minerals that are required for the low carbon transition. We're intimately connected to it through the fact that we're a pension fund and our net zero objectives. All the sectors like Volvo and the auto sector, aviation, steel sector, we're also invested in, are absolutely linked to whether the mining industry is able to produce what they need for their own sectors to meet their objectives, and in turn countries and pension funds to meet their net zero objectives. So there's a real interconnectivity, a shared responsibility, I believe, in the way that the sector really needs to drive to be the best it can be. And the way that we've been doing that in the past, I think, has been very fragmented. It's not been in a way that really has addressed the whole sector and the systemic challenges it's faced. It's been very much individualized to companies. And I think the event that Jan referenced of the Brumadinho disaster was the catalyst for investors to really stand up and recognize we've got to work with the industry, with stakeholders, with organizations like Earthworks, with indigenous communities, local impacted communities, to ensure that we've got the best practice standards identified, that we've got the infrastructure to evidence that they're being applied at the individual mine site, wherever a company is operating, and that we in turn, as investors, are going to reinforce that through our own stewardship, through the fact that we vote for chairs of companies, we appoint directors to the board, they're our boards, and that therefore we need to play a much more proactive role in the way that we do that. And the opportunity is to really challenge investors to think differently about the way that we invest in the sector. Many of the challenges it faces and some of the challenges the Minister referred to from Zambia is because the time horizons investors have are far too short. One of my colleagues from 91 in South Africa, a South African fund manager, said that the average fund holds a company for 24 months. But yet this is a sector that invests over decades and has to establish a way of work that really embeds huge upfront costs. And yet there's this contradiction with a large part of the investor community that is incentivizing short-term returns, incentivizing short-term behaviors, and those companies that are wanting to do the best are doing it against the grain of the way that finance is driving a different prioritization. Yeah. And that's why we've set up the Mining 2030 Global Investor Commission to really take a step back and say, right, we've got to do it differently. We've got an important role, and we really want to ensure that this is a sector that really drives the best practice to the benefit of communities, governments, and to the wider world.
And very, very quick follow-on, and then two very quick comments from the governments. Adam, is it working? I mean, the way you try and hold companies accountable, is it working?
I think there's examples of where you're starting to see tangible change. I think on tailings, unfortunately, it took these horrific disasters to catalyse a response where you've begun to see industry working together with investors, together with the United Nations, as well as organisations like Earthworks and other multi-stakeholder groups, recognising that this challenge is a multi-stakeholder challenge. It isn't just one for industry to address, and it isn't one that industry should seek to address by itself. Yep. And I think there you've begun to see, and I agree with Jan, it's not fast enough, but there you've begun to see codification of what good practice is. You've begun to see companies starting to implement a standard which is complex. It will obviously also need to evolve as knowledge grows as well. But you've also seen investors, insurers and banks begin to require companies to implement that standard. You're seeing investors voting against chairs of companies that are not implementing or committing to implement that standard. And you've now started to see governments starting to integrate, to Rose's point, the standard into regulation. You've seen that in Brazil and you've seen that in a couple of other countries. And so where you can see from a voluntary standard, coalescing and expertise defining what it is, the verification is happening at the mine site, and now you've got over 55% of the market by capitalisation committed to that standard. You are seeing genuine change. It isn't fast enough, and it still doesn't address the legacy of tailings waste, which is the other area.
Okay, very good. Alex, thank you very much. I want to get two very quick comments, because we have to go for lunch, as you all know, because I believe you're coming with the First Lady. We're over, actually. But to the Minister from Zambia first, Minister Nzovu, just a closing thought from you, perhaps in response to what we heard from ICMM earlier on regulation and on minimum standards, and then from Mr. Modu Kanele as well, just a quick word. Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you. I think it was gratifying to listen to these distinguished professionals here, and what they were saying really stands at the center of ensuring we transition into a green economy. And obviously, it's basically the principles: low carbon investments, resource efficiency, social inclusivity, protection of biodiversity, pollution control. I think these are key. Takeaways, financing, please make it adequate, make it accessible, make it affordable. Tailings, it's a big issue for us because most of the waste is in there. And before, standards were low. Now standards are high. We need to ensure that that waste is managed and managed properly. Technology and obviously to decarbonize the mining sector, this is key as well. We are seeing a lot more electric vehicles now, electric conveyor belts, and all these things. Circularity in the economy. I think we all know resources are finite. But for us, more important, when we utilize these resources or make them stay longer in the economy, it removes a lot of waste. Waste is a big problem for us, waste management. Value addition is key for critical minerals in particular. Social inclusivity, indeed, we must not leave everybody behind. We need to ensure that the world operates in a manner where nobody is left behind. Because this cage we are facing today of climate change is a global crisis. You cannot protect it in one country. You can only protect it when you act in a global way. If you pollute in Zambia, this pollution will reach you in Germany. So we are one. Let's act together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Modukanele, very quickly, I do have to rush you, but go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, like the other panelists said, it's important to have ESG implemented and incorporated into our operations. But I think it's also important that the other sectors, the financial sector, also because they are very influential, whatever, for all these projects to go ahead, the financial sector has to put money into it. And if they have ESG as part of one of their requirements for them to put up the funding, you will see the changes coming in. And also the investors, because they are the ones who allow the other people to put the money into this project. If they also get ESG to be part and parcel of all the developments, we will be able to go ahead. In my country, I know we are on that track, and I think we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just literally 20 seconds. Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Minister and Secretary of State. So I just wanted to say very quickly, the collaboration that is required to successfully make the energy transition is tremendous. It's like getting somebody onto the moon. And so I think, Minister, we're going to have to work with you. We're going to have to work with the private sector. We're going to have to work with civil society. And I would like to say the Secretary General has created a working group on just energy transition, critical minerals for the just energy transition. So UNEP is part of it, but I think we all need to work together, and that may be one way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to everybody. Thanks for your patience. It's a big panel. You all got to say, though, I'm happy to say thank you to you, everyone. It's lunchtime. We're going to meet back here in an hour for the finance panel. We will hear from the First Lady then in this room. We'll hear from Inga Anderson, of course, at UNEP, and from the President of UNEA. So please be back here at 1. Thanks very much indeed.